Hello and welcome aboard another episode of the Gallant Says podcast. It is Tuesday, October 2nd of 2023. You can watch this thing live at youtube.com/Paul Gallant. You can also see it at twitch.tv/Gallant Says. Also, after the fact, it's available in podcast form wherever you get your podcast. That is on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Waiting for some people to get in the room. We got Largo on twitch.tv/Gallant Says saying, Paulie, what is up, Largo? The title of tonight's video has to do with a team that I used to cover. It's the Seattle Seahawks, who we saw absolutely kick the shit out of the New York Giants 24-3. Rare Candy says, didn't realize you streamed this late, Paulie. We're changing things up a little bit after Monday Night Football, after Thursday Night Football, after Sunday Night Football. We'll see how long this lasts. We're still trying to figure out how to monetize this thing. But I'm trying to do a nightly stream. So I'm watching this game, and I am happy that the Houston Texans have a pulse again. Truly. Sunday was satisfying as hell. I mean, they haven't beaten the hell out of a team like that since 2017. But when you watch a Seahawks game and you see all that they can do like they did tonight, it's hard to not get a little bit nostalgic about my days back up in Seattle working at 710 ESPN, Seattle. Because they just win games in weird ways. It's never dull. It's never boring. It's always a little frustrating. And last night, or if you're watching right now, tonight, a perfect example of it. Take a look at their offensive statistics. Pretty gross. Gino Smith's 13-20 for 110 yards and a touchdown. He was out of the game for a little bit. He got flagged for a personal foul for getting in the face of somebody who he thought banged him up. Drew Lock came in. Drew Lock's crazy. They got a touchdown on a Drew Lock-led drive, though, while Lock was in the game. But there wasn't much offense to speak of. They ran the ball okay. But then look at the defense. They had 11 fucking sacks tonight. 11! Bobby Wagner, back from the dead. He had 2. He is very good at blitzing. Jordan Brooks, he had 2. He also had a quarterback hit and a tackle for a loss. Devon Witherspoon, their first-round pick, he had a pick 6 on a shitty Daniel Jones throw. He also had 2 sacks. Wait, a corner had 2 sacks? We still got 5 more to hand out. Uchenna Nwasu had 2 sacks. Miles Adams had 1. Mario Edwards had another. And Boya Mafe had the last. 11 sacks, 2 interceptions. A game that was hard to watch. But that's sort of what the Seahawks do. And I'm not sure how many people are tuning in now who used to listen to me when I was in Seattle. Even I will admit that I did not see the Seahawks organization being able to bounce back as quickly as it has after they had to move on from the insufferable Russell Wilson. But this is just an incredible organization. And a lot of you guys should have had more faith. And I think some of you now acted like you had faith all the while that if they move on from Russell Wilson, everything's going to be fine. But, I mean, that's just a big boy operation. This is what every NFL team should aspire to be. They don't have a traditional quarterback. They didn't lock themselves into Gino Smith, who I think is a guy you should be skeptical of from his entire NFL career. Honestly, I'd go back to West Virginia. I remember his body language at a couple of games against Syracuse, and I thought to myself, nope, that guy's going to suck. To his credit, last year, he gets an opportunity. He doesn't get punched in the jaw like he did with the Jets. and he actually did very well. But, I mean, this is a team that's winning with a middle-of-the-road quarterback, a team that scored a touchdown tonight with the backup to a middle-of-the-road quarterback, and a pass rush that hasn't done much this year. They got 11 sacks. How about that? Largo says on twitch.tv/Gallant says, hitting that last call at Club HEB. No, I've actually decided I'm not drinking for the rest of the month. Halloween, of course. I mean, it's a national holiday, so I have to drink, get in a costume, hope it gets me laid. Yeah, I know. Hey, I'm single. I'm allowed to say that. But until then, I'm actually taking the month off from drinking. Laura Sigmund, only 8:30 on the West Coast, Paul. I know. That is the other perk of these primetime games. Once the game's done, you actually have time to do things. Like, I'm supposed to go to bed right now. Doing a TV show spot on Fox 26 tomorrow at, I think, Buffalo Grill. Love Buffalo Grill. Jeff Van Gundy's randomly there all the time. I'm going to miss Jeff Van Gundy on NBA broadcasts this year. I like when he goes on his tangents. It reminds me of me. Although I don't think he goes quite as deep. Probably for the better. I just miss covering this team. I'm sure there are some people who are going to stumble in on this and say, well, you're a fucking idiot talking about the Seahawks back in the day. Granted, I mean, when I first got that job with Danny, who I love, who I miss, it was like 3 weeks into this NFL season, and I was like, shit, I got to figure out as much Seahawks stuff as I possibly can. I had a general understanding of them from afar. I had my own questions and observations, but coming in there, it was catching up. A lot of catching up. Moving across the country and all of that stuff. Then there's the whole, we're doing a radio show over Zoom before the pandemic dynamic. Challenges that I thought we overcame pretty well. So I understand why some people, when I first came in, were like, what is this fucking guy talking about? I still stand by my take that the Seahawks should never lose to the Rams. And I don't know how they always lose to the Rams, but I mean, they showed it earlier this year. That's the one loss of the season for the Seahawks, who are now 3-1, 2-0 in the division. And I mean, it's clearly still a Seahawks town. I know that Mariners fans are loyal and all, but that was never going to change. I think even if the Mariners won the World Series, this would always be a Seahawks town. And if you just listen to the broadcast of tonight's game at MetLife Stadium, how many Seahawk chants did you hear? Now, part of that had to do with everyone leaving early, but still, Seahawks fans travel well. Seahawks fans care about the NFL on the level that I wish Texans fans did. They're not there yet. Maybe they'll get there someday. I think they kind of were there in 2011. But, I mean, that's what a real football town's like. And I know it's weird to say, but Houston's not really a real football town right now. It's become a baseball town, understandably so. You got the best team in baseball over the last 6 to 7 years, running shit in the AL West. What do we have here? Oh, Rare Candy going to play Counter-Strike 2. Laura Sigmund, because you're a little too blowhard of a Patriots fan, but you really came around. See, I can't help it, though. Like, that's where I'm from. I'm an elitist. I'm an elitist. I felt the first thing I said, I remember when I think Brock and Salk were introducing me as the next morning show host. They threw me a curveball that I didn't know about. Like, what's a sports hill that you are willing to die on? And I should have said, like, I will break into the Schultz home until they move the Sonics back to Seattle. But instead I thought, you know what? Spygate wasn't that big of a deal. And I stand by that. Spygate wasn't that big of a deal. It was all about where the cameras were located. It wasn't about the actual filming of the hand signals. It turned into a thing that, honestly, I felt like was entirely based in jealousy and hatred. And here's the other thing, too. Like, if you follow the Patriots, you really know football. See, there's the insufferable stuff right there. But I miss covering them. I truly do. I miss talking to Pete Carroll after every game. I imagine for the morning show guys now at my old stomping grounds for Brock and Salk that they're probably going to have to come in early and do that, because right after they get off the plane, I imagine they'll have to get up early and do that interview. I remember we had to do that once after a Monday or a late night game where the Seahawks were playing on the East Coast. I want to say they were playing Philadelphia. I forget who they played. But I remember They were flying cross country, and I think we had to come in like really early on a Tuesday and do the interview well before the start of our show. And I wanted to complain about it so much, but I was like, you know what? Fucking 70-plus-year-old Pete Carroll is probably doing this interview straight off of a plane, and I have no idea how he has the energy that he does. I want to shift real quickly into talking about the Seattle Mariners because obviously I've talked about him from the Astros perspective over the last couple of days, specifically yesterday on my radio show. I feel bad for Mariners players. So their payroll, $134 million, ranks 18th in all of baseball, which isn't bad, but it's not good. There are some contending teams that have far lower payrolls. So to point at the payroll and the lack of spending by the Mariners as the only reason that they underachieved compared to expectations last year, I thought they would be the biggest challenge to the Astros again this year. They were in the playoffs last year. That series, I think, was more stressful than any of the other ones. I know some people will argue that Philadelphia was tougher, but I didn't take Philadelphia seriously. I did take Seattle seriously because I, of course, covered them. That payroll is not the reason that they missed the playoffs, but I think it is fair to gripe about it when, if you're a Mariners player or a Mariners fan, you know that the Mariners were baseball's most profitable team in 2022. $84 million cleared. I mean, that's pretty good. And it made them 13th on baseball's Forbes list of most valuable MLB teams. I don't know how they get those evaluations. But all you need to know is that they're making money. They're just not spending that much of that money. And that's got to be frustrating if you're a Mariners fan. It's really got to be frustrating if you're a Mariners player. And I know that some people get annoyed with where I'm at now. Listen, I root for the baseball team in whatever city pays me. That's how it goes. I've made fun of myself for it. I'm a bit of a baseball slut jumping around, you know. What's the best bandwagon? What if the Orioles beat the Astros? My friend's the play-by-play broadcaster for the Orioles. Is that a bandwagon option? But on a serious note, like I'm always going to, at the very least, publicly cape for the team that I'm in the same city as, especially since the Astros are the best team in the city that I cover. So sorry for all the strays that you're catching, because I truly did like Mariners fans when I was up there. I hope that you liked me. I don't know what the fuck they're doing, though. I'm not pointing at the players, but I am pointing at Scott Service, their manager. I am pointing at Jerry DiPoto. I am pointing at their ownership group, because you can make an argument that they're cheap. You can make an argument as well that they're alienating players. And I'm just going to go to the comments that Cal Raleigh made. He's frustrated on Saturday night. They just got eliminated. So he said, quote, "We've got to commit to going and getting those players you see other teams going for, getting big-time pitchers, getting big-time hitters. We have to do that to keep up." Yeah. It's pretty fucking obvious, huh? It's not to say you got to go New York Mets like they did this offseason, but yeah, spend some money. Why not? Publicly pressing your bosses to pay money is something you can do when you've had a good season. And Cal Raleigh had a good season, right? You guys would know better than me. I wasn't watching the team on a nightly basis. But I feel like you guys like Cal Raleigh, a.k.a. Big Dumper, a lot. So he says those things, and you get the sense that on Sunday they're not even going to bother playing against the Rangers. I know from an Astros perspective, we were all dreading the inevitable 6-0 Rangers win, which would ultimately give Texas the AL West. But to the Mariners' credit, they showed some chutzpah, and even though they pulled their top 3 hitters for their last at-bats of the game, they won the game 1-0. But before the game, Cal Raleigh looked like he had a fucking gun to his head in the dugout and had to make a statement? What is this? Said statement was this: I apologize to teammates, my coaches, fans for the timing of my comments. He said he's not going to apologize for wanting to win and wanting to bring a World Series to the city. So you see those comments, you saw the way it was set up where he spoke for about a minute and a half and no questions were allowed. You're wondering, what the fuck was this? Who told him to do this? And who thought it would be a good idea to tell him to do this? Then you get this from Scott Service, and I don't know what the fuck this was. Scott Service said this, quote, Cal, he has an opportunity to be a big-time leader for us, not just on the field, but in the clubhouse as well. And part of being a leader is, understanding where you're at, being able to control your emotions at those times. It's happened to a few of our young players this year. The situation with George Kirby earlier. I think he's also referring to Jared Kelton to kicking the cooler, breaking his foot. And I think those are growing pains. Let's pause for a second. How is this anything close? Cal Raleigh, what he said after the team got eliminated, to George Kirby saying he thought he was in a game for too long, or to Jared Kelnick throwing a little temper tantrum and breaking a bone. It's not close at all. The guy is making comments about an organization that historically hasn't gone above and beyond in a really long time when it comes to a big deal. What's the last massive deal that the Mariners gave during the offseason? We've seen them make a bunch of trades the last couple of years or so. They deserve credit for that, but they haven't gone crazy after someone like a Robinson Cano since they signed Robinson Cano. What was that, about a decade ago? It's a while ago, that's for damn sure. And that obviously didn't work out, and maybe they're a little bit gun-shy after having done that. But I don't understand why Scott Service is essentially saying, oh, yeah, it's a young rookie moment. He'll learn from that. What the fuck is that? He continued saying, but understand, too, that your words are powerful. You do have a voice, and we listen to our players. I know I always do. So, again, understand the frustration. Cal was the first guy in this morning and in my office. You talk through it on where he's at. There's just sometimes there's a better way to go about those things. Is there? Truly, is there? You just mind your P's and Q's and you don't put any public pressure on the ownership. Who's going to put pressure on the ownership? A radio station? A columnist? And they don't listen to us. And honestly, even if someone made a very strong argument as to why they should add to the payroll via a column or a rant or something like that, that's not going to really put pressure on them. People are going to see in that front office that article or that take, and they realize that 15 minutes later, people are going to forget about it. People don't forget shit like this, which is why the Mariners, I guess, thought it was a good idea to make Cal Raleigh apologize there. And here's where it really backfired. I think not just for Scott Service, but for the management. J.P. Crawford on Sunday weighed in on it and said, I think Cal had some great comments yesterday. I know there's a big controversy about that earlier this morning. And, I'm with him on that. I think we need to go out there and really make a move and help this team win. However means doing that. They just got to do it. We just got to get better. And he wasn't the only one. I think there were a couple of other players who echoed his sentiments. So they made Cal Raleigh apologize. Scott Service essentially is saying, yep, young guys say dumb things. What the fuck are they doing? Neutral observer here that's not watching the team on a daily basis. It's the kind of crossed wires that really do make you wonder if you are a Mariner on this team and if you're under team control, well, you're just fucked. But if you're not, or if you're somebody somewhere else and you're seeing this and this is how they are treating the players that are saying, yeah, let's add some guys because why fucking not? I'm not saying that they should be like Russell Wilson wanted the Seahawks to be, I'm not saying that, where he wants to have input on what offensive linemen that they potentially draft and what receivers they possibly draft. And he always had terrible ideas on who they should draft too, as it was. I'm not saying that, but they're saying, let's be more aggressive. What's wrong with that? That's what I don't get. Some comments here. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Oh, we got someone in Hiroshima? Damn. That's cool. Not going to lie, as a history lover, I do want to go there. I'm very curious as to many things that are there. There's like a church from the bomb that's still standing, right? But just about everything else got flattened there. Very curious, Akia, about the Hiroshima experience. Seriously, I could go down a deep rabbit hole with that. Largo says, twitch.tv/Gallant says, I'm sorry for calling my cheap bastard organization a bunch of cheap bastards. Yeah, like, but they may as well have had a gun in his head. Laura says, Cal was fantastic. JP fantastic. Eugenio Suarez, I think you're talking about Golden Glove, but didn't hit as well. None of the newly signed players did well enough. I'm guessing that's Teoscar Hernandez. Man. Yeah, I don't know what they're doing. I truly do not. And I wonder what happens next. It doesn't seem like Scott Service is going to get canned. I don't think they're going to trade Cal Raleigh because he's frustrated. But if they did, like, Jesus, the clubhouse would probably like turn against Mariners management as it is already. And it can't be good. And things are already dicey. I mean, shit, when I was up in Seattle, that was when the Bellevue Rotary Club fiasco happened. Remember that with Kevin Mather? One of the guys on the... Well, I forget what his official title was. I know I met him, and I met a bunch of the other Mariners brass. They had like this availability with us once, and it was very funny because it got a little hostile between management of the Mariners and one Jim Moore. As my first experience, like sitting in a room with a bunch of baseball suits, I got a real kick out of it. Having a brain fart here. But Kevin Mather, in this Bellevue Rotary Club breakfast, essentially like just roasted the entire team. He's one person in management. He might not speak for everybody else in management, but he's got to speak for somebody else in management, right? Like, do you really think that everybody is out of the Mariners front office who had those thoughts? Bullshit thoughts? I doubt it. And, I mean, it's great that they have Julio Rodriguez. It's great that they have Cal Raleigh. It's great that they have these young pitchers, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, Luis Castillo, of course. They got a lot of talent. And that talent knows it's talented. And that talent knows that more things could be done. I feel like management's going to have a meeting with them, and I wonder if they have the self-awareness to do that. I mean, they're certainly aware. I don't know if it's self-aware. They're really sensitive. I think Danny had a column on his Substack earlier today talking about the sensitivity of that organization, and I'll admit I never had any personal experiences with the Mariners and their infamous sensitivity, but I remember while working over at 710, like that was something you always had to keep in the back of your mind. Like, be careful with how you say certain things. I remember this vividly because going into one show, it still ended up not working out. More on that in a second, but we were doing a show. I think the Mariners had just played the Yankees, and Yusei Kikuchi was on the hill, and Yusei Kikuchi was pitching like a pussy. Sorry to say it like that, but he wouldn't throw a ball anywhere near the strike zone for Aaron Judge. So me trying to think of a nicer way to frame it than that word, coward, bitch, all the other ones that you would say, I said, like, well, he was kind of being deferential out there. And naturally, some guy jumped down my throat and said, like, that's offensive to Asians because there's a stereotype, which I suppose there is. I honestly didn't know. My intent was to not call the guy a pussy, and I call him something else, and I got in more trouble for that, at least online from, I think it was like Lookout Landing. I forget 100% who. Anyway, what a time, Seattle. What a time. But they are sensitive, the Mariners. You had to always be a little bit careful with how you frame things, and they would always want you to talk about them too during times like tonight where, I mean, the Seahawks just kicked the New York Giants' ass. Don't you want to talk about that a little bit more? Akia comments more on Hiroshima, the atomic bomb dome. It wasn't a church, but the Peace Park and museum is nearby. Very heavy. I can imagine. God. It's a big baseball city here. The Hiroshima Carp. Suzuki Seiya came from here. You should see a game when you come visit. I want to go to Japan so bad. That's number 1 on my list. Number 1. Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift wasn't that bad. That's not the main reason I want to go, though. Last Samurai, amazing movie. Even though you've got Tom Cruise, a white guy, as the Last Samurai. But that's not why I want to go there either. It just seems like a very cool place. Heard it's quiet, very clean. I love sake. Though I'm not drinking alcohol this month. It ought to be interesting. Yeah, I want to hear more Hiroshima tales, Akia, but thank you for that. Okay, so we've talked a lot of Seattle. Can I talk about a couple of Seattle Times headlines? Please don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at me. When I was there, in case you didn't know, on the side, a couple of times, I did conservative talk radio, filling in for Jason Rantz. I know. We thought we knew you, Paul. Hear me out. I like to think that I'm moderate and that I generally zag against consensus opinion wherever I live. I grew up in Massachusetts. I definitely leaned right growing up in Massachusetts. It's a very left-leaning place. Moved to Florida, kind of tilted back the other way. College up at Syracuse. All colleges are extremely liberal. I started to go back the other way. Come down here, start leaning to the left. Go up to Seattle. A lot of crazy things up there. So I don't know if I started leaning to the right as much as I just thought that everything that was happening was insane. And of course, I didn't have much of an understanding of it, which led to my infamous, as you can see right behind me, that is the framed, infamous chill dog tweet that got me in a lot of trouble. But I filled in, and essentially, for me, it was really easy because I didn't have to like sell my soul or anything to do this conservative talk radio. It was me just reading crazy Seattle headlines and being like, well, that's bad. Probably they shouldn't do that, huh? And it was during a time where, of course, everything was losing its mind. You had the pandemic restrictions that lasted way too long, among other things. So I didn't do anything crazy. I actually had a good time doing it. And I do like to think that I'm a little bit more politically versed after my time in Seattle, a city that I did not see eye to eye with many people in. Akia says, Seattle itself has suffered greatly from the woke crowd. You could say that again. So I'm just going to read a couple of headlines I saw in the Seattle Times. A tale of two cities. Portland offers a worrying example for Seattle. Okay, can we pause for a moment? Now, maybe Seattle is in better shape than Portland in a lot of different aspects. I am guessing it's not that much better. Is that fair? Is that fair to say? It's probably not that much better to the point where you can say, man, Portland really has me worried. What if Seattle turns into this? A lot of cities on the West Coast are having a difficult time with homeless populations. I do think that it's a byproduct of these cities trying to do the right thing and ultimately being taken advantage of. And there's obviously other things too, government corruption, etc., other things that get in the way of actually tackling this. But I've never seen as many unhoused, homeless, whatever, people doing whatever the hell they want with really like no fear of pushback as I do up there. So I feel like this headline, it was a column in the Times a couple of weeks ago. I feel like I feel like that's the kind of headline that maybe you should reconsider. Honestly, I would say like some of the same things Seattle is going through, some of the same things Portland is going through. Maybe it's not as clickbaity of a headline, but to me, I see that headline and I'm like, wait, Seattle thinks it's better than Portland? And I haven't even been to Portland. But I doubt that Seattle, as far as the way that they've been handling some of their own issues, is significantly better than Portland. Yes, Akia, so look it up. A Tale of Two Cities. Portland offers a worrying example for Seattle. And the guy made some decent points. I read the article. It wasn't naive. It wasn't a dumb article by any means, but it did feel like he thought Portland significantly worse than Seattle. And I just doubt that there's that much of a difference these days. A couple other headlines I saw. So, as someone who has been living in Texas for most of the last 12 years, you get a car there, you become so reliant on a car. There's no public transportation here. Maybe it would be a little bit better with public transportation, but it's such a spread out, sprawling city. It does seem like it would be impossible to actually do. Seattle has actually tried to make public transportation a thing. Great. Not really safe anymore. Might never be safe again. But I've always noticed headlines that come out of Seattle that seem to be trying to push people towards getting rid of their car and just either, one, taking public transit everywhere. It's not bad, the public transit in Seattle, if it's safe. Or two, and again, it's not very safe. I'm glad I'm a almost 6 foot tall white guy. I feel pretty comfortable in my own skin there. But I imagine if I'm a woman or if I'm somebody else, if I'm riding the bus, might be a little dicey from time to time. But anyway, to bring it back, I've regularly felt like people in Seattle, specifically in the government, but also in media, want you to just voluntarily give up your car and do the public transit or to go get an electronic vehicle, which are pretty expensive, which obviously require a charging port, which obviously, in addition to requiring a charging port, I believe those batteries are made of cobalt, right? Like, which is obtained through nefarious means, if you will, in third world countries. Sorry to call them a third world country, but you know I'm right. I suppose we're saving the environment while China and India burn all that coal, but we're also sort of investing in fucked up labor, whatever. I suppose if it doesn't happen in the United States, who fucking cares? That's the way some people operate. But I see columns and articles and talking points coming out of Seattle, not just from leaders and media folks, but also from actual citizens who were basically trying to shame you into not driving anymore and to ride a bike and stuff like that. So you save the environment, I guess. I don't know. Naomi Ishizaka is somebody who always had these, I felt like, almost trolling articles in the Seattle Times because it just felt like they were so left-leaning that it had to be a parody of sorts. So here's a headline. Why you should ditch your car for a week in October. And, okay, the article did not have anything to do with climate change or anything like that. So that was nice at least. I saw that headline and I was like, oh, God, here we go again. So apparently there's this challenge that Disability Rights Washington started. And over a week, people don't drive so that they can experience what it's like to be disabled, where you can't drive, or to be an older person who can't afford a car, or a young person, what it's like to experience that on a daily basis. Hand up, as someone who lives a mile away from his job and was without a car for 4 to 5 weeks and who did walk to work on a daily basis in 100-degree heat in Houston, it fucking sucks. It fucking sucks. You don't need to actually go do it yourself. Yeah, it must suck to be disabled. Seriously. If you can't drive and you're an older person as well, stuck in a nursing home, that's gotta fucking suck. If you're a kid, you can't drive. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks for parents. They gotta drive you everywhere. You don't need to give up your car for a week to experience what it's like to not have a car. If you don't have a car, you know. If you have a car, you're like, thank God I have a car. Ridiculous monthly payment. Ridiculous car insurance because of uninsured motorists. But why you should ditch your car for a week in October? Nah, Naomi, fuck that. And I saw another article too, and again, I'm sorry, I'm just going off of Seattle Times headlines that I had bookmarked and figured I'd talk about the next time I talk about Seattle sports and stuff. Is Inslee's plan working? The electric car age arrives. For some. It's an article that was, I think, like 2-3 weeks ago. It says that people are moving towards buying electronic vehicles as gas prices surge. And at one point, it brought up car tabs, which were something that were very unique to me when I first moved to Seattle because they were expensive. You know, car registration in Texas costs about $60 or so. You got to get an inspection. That's about $20 before you get the registration. So it costs about $80. But you could be paying like $300, $400 at minimum for your tabs, which seems like it's the same thing as car registration up in Washington, which makes sense. Okay, the money's going towards building up the public transit system that we talked about a little bit earlier, which is not safe at all, but okay, cool. Like 2045, I can use the light rail from Ballard, finally. When I was up there, I was living in Ballard. But it's crazy because I vividly remember while I was up there that people voted for $30 tabs. And then it was deemed unconstitutional, even though 53% of people voted for it. But it's unconstitutional. And 8 of 9 people voted it was unconstitutional in the Washington Supreme Court. What the fuck? That would piss me off. Anyway, I guess not my problem anymore. Some comments. Laura Signet. How do you feel the cities compare to Houston? I'm assuming talking about Seattle. All right, I'm gonna be honest here. Don't get mad at me. From an aesthetic perspective, Seattle blows Houston out of the water. The mountains, the lakes, the worst weather of the year isn't the mist. The mist gets old, but you can deal with the mist for a couple of months from, October through March generally. The summer's awesome. The worst part of the year is when the forest fires happen. So from that perspective, it's hard to find a city that, when taken care of, is prettier. And I've lived in St. Pete, Florida. I've lived in Boston, Massachusetts. I've lived in Syracuse, New York. Syracuse, New York, not making the cut. And Houston. So I've lived in 5 different cities. Boston, to me, is not a city I lived in that long. I find it... I grew up there, and I never want to go back, if that makes any sense. It feels very small town up there. It can be pretty, but I hated how dark it got early. I hate snow. It snows all year, it feels like. So that was the same with Syracuse, too. So I can't do snow again. Seattle, really, it never snowed. It was nice to get it every now and then. I remember we had that crazy day where it was frozen outside and there were cars just like abandoned in the middle of the road. The big issue that I had most with Seattle was I felt like people there were very intolerant of people who didn't have the same views as them. And the pandemic, I think, escalated everything and made everyone lose their minds a little bit, right? In retrospect, I wonder how many of the people who were yelling about compliance, specifically to those people who became more skeptical. Because I'll admit, at first, I wasn't skeptical about anything. I was like, fuck it. They want me to do these things. I'll do it. It's fine. But over time, when the CDC was changing, like what it knew and what it didn't, and when it was publicly sharing with everybody, the constantly changing information to me made me become very skeptical about all of this. Getting COVID right after I got the booster, I was like, well, what the fuck's the point of this? I thought that I wasn't supposed to get it. That's at least what the CDC had told me. And I suppose that maybe I should know better. I should have more than a limited understanding about diseases and shit, which is what a lot of people would say to anyone online who just ask questions. And I thought, like, it started with that, but that was where I started to notice that there's a lot of people in Seattle who will think less of you if you have a different opinion from them politically. I hate that. I really do. I think Houston's very close to middle of the road when it comes to politics. I mean, it's a blue city and a red state, obviously, so that leads to some interesting exchanges, if you will. And obviously those can get pretty nasty too. But I felt like a lot of people up in Seattle had the mindset of, if you come here, how dare you have a different thought process. And that's bullshit. Someone was getting mad at me for eating Chick-fil-A. Like, and they said that's why I didn't work out in Seattle. It's Chick-fil-A. It's fucking chicken sandwich. I don't care. I don't care about the politics of the corporation that sells me the chicken sandwich. I just know that's the one fast food place I can go to, and they're not going to screw my order up. So there was stuff like that. Most cities are a lot more similar than you would think, as someone who has moved all over the place and lived all over the place. But that was the thing that disappointed me most about Seattle. And I came there during the pandemic, so I have to be fair with what I say publicly about it. I know I've bitched and moaned about it privately before, because it was a tough time. I mean, you move to a new city and you can't fucking do anything for like 8 months. And you're in great shape and you work out and you eat healthy and you're doing all of this so that other people are safe, which, okay, cool, I can sacrifice. But after a while, like, fuck this. I want to live life. And I think, like, more and more of my skepticism that I started to publicly, like, share, I think the more of it came out, I think the less people liked me. Could be wrong on that. I do miss it from time to time. This is my home, Houston. It truly is. And I'm glad I got to do the 2 years up there. I think I learned a lot about myself. I do think I got better as a radio host. I wish the pandemic hadn't hit. I wish that Jay Inslee and the government didn't lose their shit on it the way that they did. Would have been nice if things opened up a little bit earlier. Maybe we would have actually still had a radio show and we wouldn't have lost a ton of money as a company, and I'd be still up there. But you can't really control that, so here I am back here talking about whatever the fuck I want to talk about, which is great. Oh, wow, Hakeem Olajuwon's in the chat. Born and raised in Houston. Still don't like the weather. What part of Houston did you stay in? I live in Tanglewood right now, actually. Kia said, I spent most of my early childhood in Houston, which is how I became a fan of the local teams. My mom was from there, moved to Louisiana, always hated the climate in both those areas. Yeah, the climate is fucking brutal here. It is still like 96 every day. I think we're supposed to finally get a cold front this weekend. So there you go. I'm just riffing at this point. If you stayed this long, congratulations. You really like me. I appreciate you. I don't like myself this much, but I appreciate you tuning into this Seattle-centric edition of the Gallant Says podcast. We try to do this weeknights, Sunday nights after Sunday night football, Monday nights after Monday night football, Thursday nights after Thursday night football, and Tuesdays and Wednesdays at times to be determined. I'm still trying to figure that out, but we're trying to do this 5 days a week. It's uncensored. It's all over the place. This was a little low energy for my liking, but I'm glad that everyone stopped by. If you haven't already, subscribe to me on YouTube, youtube.com/Paul Gallant, or on Twitch, twitch.tv/Gallant Says. If you're more into that, you can also get this wherever you get your podcasts after the fact: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. And if you ever have a question, gallantsays@gmail.com is how you do it. Anyway, I say anyway too much, probably. I use it as a transition. I don't think it really works as a transition either. But anyway, Thank you so much for tuning in. So long. Farewell. Have yourselves a wonderful late Monday night or Tuesday morning. And make sure you tune into the Paul Gallant Show, 10 to noon, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.